Government official kills my pet duck, so I make him lose his job, his house, and his marriage. Here's what happened. Subscribe to Am I the Jerk on YouTube and hit the bell for notifications. So here's my story. Back in May of 1990, there was an unseasonably late snowstorm. A few days after it snowed, I was riding my bike and found a baby duckling all by itself near a river. There was no mother duck around, so I put it inside my shirt to keep it warm and brought it home on my bike. My mother thought it would die because it was so small and cold and shivering, but I put it under a light and after a while it dried off and started hopping around and peeping. It was so cute. It followed me like a puppy. I called it Philip because that's what it sounded like it was saying whenever it peeped. So after a few weeks, I figured I ought to teach it to swim and eat stuff in the lakes. So I started bringing it to a small local beach. Philip did well. He swam around and ate weeds and snails, and everyone at the beach loved him. Now my troubles started. After I had brought Philip to the beach several times, the lifeguard told me that his boss, the director of Parks and Recreation, who will be known as Stuffed Shirt, had told him that there was a city ordinance against bringing pets to city parks. I tried to explain to the lifeguard that it was only for a few weeks, and then the duck would be grown and able to live on its own. But he didn't care. I was upset. How was I going to teach the duck to live on its own? I went to the library and got out the large blue books of city ordinances and looked up the relative ordinance. I discovered something interesting. There was one ordinance that prohibited bringing dogs into city parks, and then another that prohibited bringing horses into city parks, both of which I see happening fairly often, by the way. But no ordinance against bringing ducks into city parks. So I went home and called Stuffed Shirt. However, it being a weekend, he wasn't in, so his secretary answered the phone. I told her what had happened and what the ordinances actually said, and told her to tell Stuffed Shirt that I would be bringing my duck to the beach anytime I felt like it. Well, apparently when Stuffed Shirt heard this, his head exploded. He called me back and told me that he had a conference with the city attorney about my duck, and according to him, the city attorney had decided that the law should be interpreted to refer to all domestic pets or animals, not merely dogs or horses. Then he said he had called the DNR because I was not supposed to have a duck. Now, please note the following at this point. 1. Attorneys are not privileged to interpret the law. Only judges are supposed to do that, and the law was not ambiguous such that it required interpretation. One specifically said dogs, the other specifically said horses. Number 2, note that at this point my duck was referred to as a domestic animal. Anyway, a few days later the DNR agent shows up at my house and marches right into my backyard without ringing the doorbell and without a warrant. We'll call him Butt Buddy, because I suspect that was his relation to Stuffed Shirt, as he wasn't even from my city. Stuffed Shirt had gotten him to come over from another city. I was in my backyard at the time feeding Philip, and Butt Buddy proceeds to read me the riot act. First, he tells me that my duck was a wood duck, which is a wild animal, after Stuffed Shirt had previously referred to it as a domestic animal. And this was a lie, by the way. I later learned that my duck was a mallard, which can be considered either wild or domestic, depending on the circumstances. He then tells me that I can't have a wood duck, which wasn't my duck anyway, without a game farm license, and that I couldn't get a game farm license unless I had 40 acres of land. He then told me that I either had to let my duck go by the end of the day, or he would confiscate it and take it to a lake in another town, where I would never see it again. I told him my duck was too little to let go, and I was going to let it go in a month, but he wouldn't hear it. He told me I had to do as I was told. I was crying as I let my poor little duckling Philip go on the lake. I went back that evening to check on him, and he was cowering, terrified under a boardwalk. The next day, I couldn't find him at all. He probably got eaten by something, because he was way too little to let go. Then, wouldn't you believe it, the next week, Butt Buddy the game warden came back to my property, without permission, again, to make sure the duck was not still there. After losing my duck, I went to the library and spent hours looking up the laws about wildlife and game farms. And I found out something very interesting. Butt Buddy the game warden had lied to me. As it turned out, you only needed 40 acres of land to get a game farm license on land where hunting, trapping, or killing of animals was happening. Otherwise, there was no land requirement to get a game farm license, only a pen size requirement, which my pen for my duckling more than met. If I was devastated and crying my eyes out before, now I was so furious that my head was exploding. They killed my duck, not because it was the law, but just for an ego trip. So I decided to get even. I was the town eccentric, so I didn't have a reputation to lose, and didn't care what people thought of me. I spent the next several weeks walking around downtown telling everyone who would stop and listen about my duck, and how Stuffed Shirt and Butt Buddy had lied to me and made me condemn my own pet to death. Maybe people thought I was nuts, but I didn't care. Everyone was finding out what happened, and Stuffed Shirt was scared. I had a friend from work who also worked part-time in his office, and she told me he was so frightened that he had gone to a lawyer to try to pursue a slander charge against me, to get me to stop telling people what happened. Only the lawyer told him there was absolutely nothing that could be done, because truth was an absolute defense against slander. And if he didn't like the truth, whose fault was that? Stuffed Shirt's critical mistake, of course, was actually filing a complaint with the DNR so that he could get Butt Buddy Game Warden to legitimately intimidate me into releasing my baby duckling way too soon. The DNR, like all government agencies, keeps records. If he tried to claim I was lying and slandering him, there was documented proof of what had happened. So the outcome? Stuffed Shirt lost his cushy city bureaucrat job as the director of Parks and Recreation, and the last I heard of him, about 10 years after this happened, had lost 2 other jobs. His house, because he couldn't make payments when he had no job, his wife, who didn't want to stick around when he had no job, and he was somewhere in a trailer park, drinking himself to death. I kinda hope the jerk did, too. Yeah, I think our original poster called it in this one. This just sounds like a power trip. If they're really trying to refer to these laws, you'd think they would have read them before going through all of this. I assume they did. They must have been aware that they were bending this at least. But at the end of the day, it is very clear in there that they're talking about specific animals. And ducks are perfectly natural animals to be at the beach anyway. Given the circumstance and how small the duck was, I really don't see what the threat was here, and why the director felt such need to take such drastic action. It seems like he put a lot of time and resources into this duck, which is kinda stupid considering it was gonna be a wild animal in a month anyway. Well, it turns out that he lost everything because of that duck, so I guess it kinda did end up being a big deal for him. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some Bybee music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below. And don't forget to subscribe. My manager threatened to fire me over my hair color. I attended a university about 10 years ago. As is pretty standard when one is a student, I dyed my hair funky colors. When I returned home to my summer job, I had short blue hair. My summer job was in retail. I worked at a checkout. One day, the manager pulled me aside and told me the uniform policy said I wasn't allowed to have the majority of my hair an unnatural color. I asked what a majority meant, and he said it was allowed to be streaks, but not my whole head. So I went with a box of brown dye. The next day I turned up to work with the majority of my hair brown, but my fringe and bangs and my undercut were still blue. Because of my hairstyle being short from the front where the customers were, all that could be seen was my blue fringe. My manager told me it was unacceptable, even though I pointed out that more than 3/4 of my hair was now brown. He said I had to dye the fringe and undercut brown too, or he'd fire me. I dyed them brown and immediately started wearing clip-in colored hairpieces. He let me keep those, but was not happy. I still don't know why my ability to serve people was affected by my hair color. Yeah, believe it or not, your hair color has nothing to do with your ability to do your job. God forbid you be an individual and have a little bit of fun with your hair color. Same with a lot of places not allowing you to have visible tattoos and such. It really seems kinda stupid by today's standard. Anyone can have a tattoo. Anyone can dye their hair. You see 60-year-old ladies with purple or pink hair, and no one's judging them. Why? Because of their age? But you, as a younger student with dyed hair, you're viewed as more of a rebel, I guess? I don't know. but people really need to not look at the world through glasses like that. That's not how people actually are. Our manager wanted an email every time we updated the system, so his email inbox got spammed with tens of thousands of updates. I work as an integrated circuit design engineer. My team is mostly based in the Bay Area, but for some reason my current project is being headed up on the East Coast. We haven't met the project manager in person, working remote due to COVID, and it turns out he's a bit more controlling and overbearing than we're used to. Now, chip design isn't the same as software development, but it has some similarities. We use a version control system to check in changes to the design to make sure we can roll back if there are errors or whatever. It works great. In order to keep the database manageable, we typically don't check in too often, only when we make a significant change we want others to be able to see. So we would do a few check-ins on average normally. Anyway, this new project manager came down with an edict last month that one of our KPIs, key performance indicators, one of the ways they evaluate our performance, will be how many check-ins we do. Predictably, people have started checking in new versions of their designs for every little thing they do, and it's become harder and harder to comprehend how the project is going, as the history's all muddled now. The project manager has configured the version control system so he gets an email for every check-in so he can keep tabs on us. During my last one-on-one a few days ago with the project manager, I told him the team didn't want to be evaluated on check-ins anymore, because doing too many check-ins is counterproductive. But the guy wouldn't budge. We're getting to the point in the project where we have to start hammering the design with tests to try and find faults. We do this by generating many thousands of files that have test sequences in them. These are called test vectors. Then we run a program that sends our design random samplings of these test vectors. Anyway, for traceability, we check in these test vector files in the version control system. So this morning I was on Slack with a few team members and we come up with an idea. We usually make a zip file of the test vectors to check in once, but there's a performance argument that we can make to just check them in individually as raw text. So cue the malicious compliance. Project manager wants an email from every check-in? Fine. Project manager wants to evaluate on number of check-ins? Fine. We wrote a script that makes each team member check in a certain amount of test vectors, tens of thousands for each of us. This will nuke both his KPI results and kill his inbox. Could happen to a nicer guy. We just launched the script 30 minutes ago. Haven't gotten an email from him yet, presumably because his email inbox has melted down. Update, he just called my cell. He was surprisingly good-natured about it. He just basically said he got the point and that was pretty clever. Then he asked some more project-related stuff. Sorry that the outcome didn't have more fireworks, but I don't think we'll be doing tons of check-ins anymore. So I call that a victory. Okay, I like this one, because the manager actually understood what they're trying to say. Sure, maybe he didn't exactly get where they were coming from his point of view before. But once they showed him how ridiculous that was, he understood and didn't try to stupidly stick to his guns even though he knew he was wrong. He admitted his fault and took the employee's advice on how things could be better. That's a good manager right there. This one, not a jerk. I had all kinds of random crazies messaging me on Facebook because of this one guy. A few years ago, there was an incident with a dog at a friend's work. The dog was a brachycephalic, a squished-faced breed, that collapsed during routine handling, received first aid, made it to a vet clinic, and was euthanized about 5 or 6 hours later. I was there at the time and performed the first aid. I've worked as a vet nurse and had recently undertaken a pet first aid course. The owner of the business offered the pup's purchase price and vet fees to the dog owner as compensation, but the dog owner wanted more and they turned it down. Legally, pets are considered property, so emotional damages, etc. are not factored into legal proceedings. 3 months after the dog passed and the owners realized they weren't getting the big payout they expected, the breeder of the dog started a Facebook campaign to trash the business, my friend who was handling the dog, and even myself, who had no affiliation with the business other than using them and making a friend in the process. I start getting attacked by nutjobs on Facebook. Private messages asking if I enjoyed smothering a dog to death, telling me I should die. I stepped away from the whole shebang. Not worth my mental health. A few days later, enter Jerk. Volunteered at the local SPCA, watched some Cesar Millan videos, and thinks he's a dog trainer. He takes this campaign on as his own personal project. He starts messaging people who were there. He sends me a message. I tell him to get a life. 5 messages total between us. He screenshots it, posts it to that page, and encourages people to harass me. I do a quick search. He's using a trademarked phrase as his business name. He's not registered for tax. He has no permits to have pets on his property as part of his unregistered business. It ticks me off to no end, as I had a legit pet business and did all the right things, at great expense. A few emails later, "Dear trademark holder, is this guy your employee? He's giving your trademark a bad name. Hi, tax office, this guy has income. Are you aware of it? Hi, local council, what's this guy's animal business number? Just want to make sure he's legit." A week goes by, then a post goes up on his business page. Due to recent goings-on, I will not be operating this business anymore, effective immediately. Moral of the story, don't fling crap at others when your own crap is not sorted. Or people in glass houses. Whatever floats your boat. Also, the breeder's been suspended from the state's kennel club. We don't get a whole lot of what actually happened here that set all this into action. But I will say that people tend to get a little crazy sometimes online with seeking revenge, and won't hesitate to personally attack people online. It's almost like there's a protest happening on your social media. You've got all these random people yelling at you, and in this case, it sounds like a lot of them don't know the story. It sounds like there was some kind of accident with the dog, and this person was just trying to help. They just happened to be there and were trying to do the right thing. But because the internet latches onto things and tends to blow them out of control, this ended up happening. Who knows? Maybe this didn't quite go down as our original poster is leading us to believe. Maybe they deserved all this attention. But either way, people shouldn't be sending threats over Facebook and things like that. You're not making any progress towards what you're actually trying to accomplish. You're just personally attacking someone. Entitled party girls steal my friend's property. So I proceed to prank them for the rest of the semester. Freshman year of college, I became friends with one of the girls on my floor named Jenna. We became decent friends after we and some other people on our floor would hang out every weekend or so. Jenna and her roommate, a nice nerdy girl, lived in a double that shared a bathroom with another double. It was set up in a way that you could walk freely between the 2 rooms via the bathroom. Both bathroom doors had locks on both sides for privacy when you needed to use it. Well, Jenna's suite mates were these 2 attractive party-type girls who gave 0 craps and never cleaned. As in, overfilling the trash cans with used feminine products and things like that. I'll refer to both of them as dose jerks. Jenna would occasionally complain in passing about them being inconsiderate and dirty throughout the fall semester. One day, during the spring semester, I overheard from our mutual friend that while Jenna and her roommate weren't in their room, dose jerks came in and stole her full-length mirror. She was upset and cried at one point. I was livid. I remember reading someone's comment on some message board about a prank where you would fill up a manila folder full of shaving cream, slide the open end under the door, then stomp on it. The force of the stomp would spray it everywhere on the other side of the door. Bingo. I strolled my butt to the pharmacy and office supply store to pick those up, returned, and waited until it was late on a weeknight. I sporadically walked by Dose Jerk's room to make sure I didn't hear any sounds, likely to be asleep. When it was time, I loaded up as much as possible, slid it under the door, and fired. Holy crap, it was loud. Makes sense when you're stomping on a tiled floor. I quickly grabbed the envelope and ran to my room, then went to bed. I told Jenna what I did next time I saw her, and we had a good laugh. She told me several days later that Dose Jerks asked her if she knew who did it, and that it was annoying AF to clean. She basically shrugged her shoulders. I proceeded to do it several more times before the semester ended. Don't steal crap, jerks. I've never heard of that one, but it sounds incredibly effective. I'm sure you've given a few people here today some ideas. But no, these girls sounded like they deserved it. I'm sure they were treated all high and mighty and were used to people giving them everything they wanted, to the point where apparently they'll just take it without asking. Good thing our original poster wasn't gonna let them get away that easily. They deserved a little bit of karmic justice, I think. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. Or if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode. If you like Am I the Jerk, give Am I the Genius a shot. Everything linked in the description.